The roar of the crowd, the clash of steel, a brutal fight to the death. For decades, that's the image of the Roman gladiator Hollywood has hammered into our heads. But what if I told you the most famous part of that picture, a gladiator dying in every single battle, is also the biggest lie? The truth is, these fighters were crazy valuable investments who almost always lived to fight another day. And knowing that one fact changes everything you thought you knew about the Colosseum. Myth 1, the fight to the death myth. So let's tackle that big bloody lie we all believe. Every gladiator fight ended with a corpse. Movies absolutely love this trope, but in reality it was just bad business. Think of a gladiator less like a condemned prisoner and more like a modern-day UFC champion or a star quarterback. Their owners, called lanistas, spent a fortune to find them, house them, feed them, and train them. Killing off your most valuable asset after 1 or 2 fights would have been a terrible financial move. The numbers actually show that in some periods, the death rate in the arena was as low as 1 in 10, sometimes closer to 1 in 5. Most fights ended when one gladiator surrendered or was too hurt to go on. A referee, yeah, there were refs, would step in and stop the fight. The loser could then appeal to the crowd for mercy, and if they put on a good show, they were usually spared to fight again. Deaths happened, for sure, but they were the exception, not the rule. These guys were entertainers, and they were worth a heck of a lot more alive than dead. Myth 2. The slave-only myth. Okay, so if they weren't all dying, who were these fighters? Hollywood tells us they were all slaves, dragged into the arena against their will. And while many certainly were prisoners of war or criminals, a surprising number were free men who volunteered. These volunteers, known as octorati, willingly signed contracts with gladiator schools. Why on earth would anyone choose a life like that? Well, for the same reasons people chase dangerous careers today, fame and fortune. Successful gladiators were the rock stars of ancient Rome. They had fan clubs, their faces were painted on walls for advertisements, and they could earn prize money that a normal worker couldn't even dream of. For some, it was a way out of crushing debt. For others, it was their one shot at glory. That flips the whole script, doesn't it? It moves many of these fighters from pitiful victims to ambitious pros who chose to risk it all for a chance at stardom. Myth 3. The squalid life myth. Hollywood loves to show gladiators chained up in filthy dungeons between fights. But since they were such valuable assets, the idea of them living in constant squalor is just another exaggeration. Their owners had to keep them in peak physical condition. Believe it or not, gladiators got better medical care than most average Romans. They had doctors, regular massages, and access to baths to help them recover. Their diet was also carefully managed. They were essentially carb loading, eating a diet heavy in barley, beans, and grains to build body mass. This created a layer of fat that helped protect their vital organs from shallow cuts in the arena, literally increasing their odds of survival. So, instead of starving wretches, picture a group of burly, well-fed athletes being carefully maintained for peak performance. Myth 4. The untrained brute myth. This brings us to the final myth, that the fights themselves were just a chaotic free-for-all between two brutes hacking away at each other. Nothing could be further from the truth. Gladiator combat was a highly specialized martial art. Each fighter was an expert in a specific class, like the retiarius with his net and trident, or the heavily armed murmillo. They trained for hours every day in schools called ludi, practicing against wooden posts to perfect their technique and using weighted practice swords to build strength. The matches were governed by a strict set of rules and overseen by 2 referees who could pause the fight, just like in modern combat sports. This wasn't just a bloody brawl, it was a dazzling spectacle of skill, strategy, and endurance designed to entertain an audience. The next time you see a gladiator on your screen, remember that the reality was far more complex and, honestly, way more interesting. These weren't just disposable slaves doomed to die for a roaring crowd. They were highly trained, professional athletes in a sophisticated and brutal sport. They were celebrities, volunteers, and above all, valuable investments who usually got to see the sunrise. Which one of these myths surprised you the most? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed busting some Hollywood myths, be sure to like and subscribe for more trips back into real history.